Thank you for the committee that organized today. The Citizens Committee, Laura Weinberg's going to ask some questions and help present some of the things that kick off the program today. We have a really powerful panel in the sense of if you want to get an update, you want to get to the information, we've brought everybody together. That's the idea. So we're going to give time for full presentations by Lockheed Martin, and then we're going to hear a presentation from the DEC. And then very fortunately, we have Sarah Malin, who's had really a long history of expertise on protecting Long Island's drinking water that'll help us to kind of sift through what we just heard in those two presentations and sort of help us with some of the understanding it all. And we're definitely committed to having a Q&A. We do have the Water Authority also here today. So I apologize if I start a little slow, so maybe I'm just going to kick right into it. We have so many people. We don't want to hold anything up.
Also, is Paul Schrader here? We've been Haslet Lakeville Water Department, and he's not going to present, but he's going to answer questions.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. So yeah, part of the Q&A be an opportunity to draw in some additional authority like that if we have a question for them that they want to address. All right. Well, great stuff, everybody. Would we like to get started? I think we're ready. Laura, did you want to mention anything else before we hear from our first presenters from Lockheed Martin?
No, I think that you covered everything succinctly and ready to go forward.
Okay. Well, thank you again, everybody that's participating on Zoom. You will have an opportunity for Q&A, so stay engaged. And let's now hear first from Lockheed Martin. And essentially, we're looking for starting with the big picture, if you could. I'm sure you have your thoughts prepared as to what you want to cover, but we'd like to really get an understanding also of the history in case you weren't planning to just jump right into it, but you can give us a little context, a little history. Just how big a plume is it? Is it still moving? You know, can you characterize it for us? And so take it away. Thank you.
I actually have a presentation for you guys.
Okay.
Oh, minor issue. It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
We can't
So
have that.
slight issue right off the bat.
I'm sorry, I will fix that for you right now.
Thank you.
I'll pass.
A couple months ago.
Okay, you should be able to do that now.
Aha, yes.
Great. Hey, Glenn.
So,
No fun.
sorry, folks, here we go.
We like the pooches.
Hopefully you can all see my screen now. Okay, well, good evening. My name is Glenda Clark. I am the Lockheed Martin project lead for the environmental cleanup project from the former Eunice facility located at 1111 Marcus Avenue. Appreciate you inviting Lockheed Martin here tonight to speak on this project. We've been very fortunate in the past to be able to speak with elected officials and community leaders, either through site tours, actually at the site back before COVID when we could have people on site, and via conference calls and emails now. Tonight with me from Lockheed Martin, I do have on the line as a participant, Chris Klein. She is the East Coast Remediation Program Manager, as well as Mary Morningstar, our legal counsel. So tonight I've been asked to provide an update on the groundwater, but I would like to highlight that we do a lot more than just groundwater remediation at the site. And if you're curious, we do have fact sheets available. These are Lockheed Martin produced fact sheets on our website, which is lockheedmartin.com/greatneck. You can find information from groundwater, which we're discussing tonight, to just an overall project overview, as well as some project specific fact sheets related to something like soil or soil vapor. Also on the website, if you're really curious about our technical documents, we've got technical documents up on the webpage, as well as a timeline that shows the history of this project, because I know we've only got 15 minutes tonight to go through all of this.
Thank you for presenting a link to all that information.
Sure, and I'll repeat that link again throughout the presentation. But I want to give everybody just an overview before I really dive into groundwater of what we're looking at here. So what I've got here, this is 1111 Marcus Avenue. It's bounded to the north by Marcus Avenue, to the west by Lakeville Road. The south is Union Turnpike, and off to the east we have Triad Business Park. So this property, back in the 30s, was essentially undeveloped. In the 40s, the US government came in to develop the property to support wartime effort. It went through a series of changes in ownership, mergers and acquisitions. Lockheed Martin ended up purchasing this property in 1996. And with that purchase, it was actually a larger company that we purchased that owned this land. In that purchase, we ended up with the responsibility for the environmental cleanup, even though we didn't cause the environmental cleanup. So there's a few places on this picture I'd like to point out first. First is the original source of contamination for the groundwater. This is going to be in the southeast portion of the property. Back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, what was common practice was for large manufacturing sites to install something called a dry well. And this is basically a structure in the ground or like a well where they literally would dump liquid waste into the wells, into the ground. Once the chemical gets to the bottom, it percolates into the ground and then into the groundwater. This was back in the day a common industrial practice. Obviously, it doesn't happen nowadays. We know that's bad, but the theory back then was out of sight, out of mind. We don't have to worry about it. And now, with Lockheed Martin purchasing this property, we are now responsible for that cleanup. So in 1998, just 2 years after we purchased the property, we did do an 800-ton excavation in this southeast corner to remove some soil from the 3 dry wells that had been in place. Now in the southeast corner of the building, we have something called a soil vapor extraction system, or SVE. And this system basically, it's capturing any of the residual vapors in the soil, pulling them up, and we're treating them. And then next, I'll draw your attention to the northeast portion of the property. This actually is where we house our first groundwater treatment system, or on-site groundwater treatment system. We call it Operable Unit 1. I'll refer to it tonight as OU1. This treatment system is capturing groundwater from the northern border of the property and pulling it in, treating it, and then we re-inject the water as clean back into the aquifer. And then we'll keep moving north. This is Northern State Parkway. So just north of Northern State Parkway, we have a facility called Operable Unit 2, or OU2. This is our off-site groundwater treatment system. It's just to the east of Tanner's Road and is actually a former Manhasset Lakeville Water District facility that we retrofitted to turn into a groundwater pump and treat system. And the OU2 treatment system is the same process as OU1. We pull up the groundwater, we treat it, and then we re-inject clean water back into the aquifer. And I'll show you in a few slides where all that stuff is located, where all the equipment is located. But I would like to highlight just quickly before I move on that typically anything that is on site, any kind of contamination on site, we call that OU1 in general. Anything that has moved off site, which is groundwater, we refer to that as OU2. So move on. This is the project timeline that I mentioned is on the webpage, lockheedmartin.com/greatneck. And there's a few things I want to highlight for everybody. This timeline shows basically from project start back in the 40s when the project was developed. We have the history of the site, the environmental history of the site, and that's all located below the dates. And then above the dates, we have our community engagement. But I know it's probably hard to read because it's a lot of information packed onto one slide. That's just also why we have it on the website, so you can enlarge it in your free time whenever you want to go check this out. But what I hope you get from this slide is that we have been engaged with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, or DEC, and the New York State Department of Health since 1996, so almost 25 years now since we purchased this property. The DEC and DOH provide all the regulatory oversight for all the work that we do. Basically, we don't do anything without them knowing about it and approving what we're going to be doing. So also on this slide, you'll be able to see that Lockheed Martin has implemented some of the work ahead of actually receiving the requirements from the DEC. And that'll all be on the bottom portion of this chart. And then above in the green boxes, this is really highlighting our community outreach. What have we done over the years to keep the community updated on what's been going on? Our last big public meeting was in 2014. That was in support of the Record of Decision, or RODS. And the Record of Decision, we've got two right now that we fall under. The record of decision is the DEC's like administrative tool that creates the rules that we have to follow to meet our environmental responsibilities. So all of this is going to be marked on our timeline. So I'll jump and I'll go through this slide quickly, but don't worry, we're going to see it again. So this is basically a graphic of what our groundwater plume looks like as of the end of 2019. Some things I want to point out. So to be able to build this image, we've been collecting groundwater data for many years. Basically, since we took over the project, we've been collecting groundwater data. Our groundwater well network at this point is over 100 wells that we're collecting data from, and then inputting into our model. So the remediation process is really prescriptive. So we go in, we collect the data, we compile it, we analyze it, we submit it to the regulator. The regulator will frequently come back to us and say, okay, now let's collect more information. Let's see what else we can find. And it becomes kind of a cohesive effort between us and the DEC to figure out what's next, what are we doing best. So the other thing I want to point out, again, we'll see this graphic in a bit, but there are 4 contaminants of concern that are related to the former Unisys site at 1111 Marcus Avenue. These contaminants for this picture are all combined into what we call TVOC, or total volatile organic compounds. And the 4 compounds are trichloroethene, or you've probably heard TCE, tetrachloroethene, or PCE, cis-1,2-dichloroethene, or cis-1,2-DCE, and freon-113. And these chemicals have been used in the past as like cleaning solvents at the site. So I'll talk quickly about our 2 groundwater treatment systems. So our first groundwater treatment system is OU1. Again, it's on the northeast portion of the property. And I threw in, it's going to change. I threw in a picture of it right here. This treatment system actually began operation in 1993 and still operates today, although we have upgraded it many times to the state-of-the-art system that it is today. I think our last upgrades occurred in 2018. But this treatment system collects groundwater from 4 recovery wells on the property. It's treated through the system that you see on the screen and then re-injected back into the groundwater. The system operates at 850 gallons per minute, or another way to look at that is over 1.2 million gallons per day. Our offsite treatment system, the one that used to be it's the former Manhasset Lakeville Water District facility that we refigured for our use, has been operated since 2004. This treatment system was installed as an interim treatment system as we were working with the DEC to actually get our record of decision. We didn't get the record of decision for this until 2014, so we were operating for many years ahead of that record of decision, trying to get ahead of this plume and treat the contamination. So the offsite treatment system operates at 500 gallons per minute, or just over 700,000 gallons per day. So these 2 treatment systems alone, we estimate have already removed over 70% of the total contaminant mass from the groundwater, which is equivalent to over 59,000 pounds of contamination that has been removed by these 2 systems alone. So now we're back to the plume map that I promised. So I'm going to take some time here because there's a lot of information on this slide, and I'm hoping that I can help everybody really understand what we're looking at and know when I'm talking about different things, where it is and what exactly we're looking at. So, sorry about that. I'll start by saying the light green colors, like right there and right there, those are our highest air levels of contamination, where the gray on the periphery of the plume, those are our lowest levels. And so we'll start from the south because the groundwater travels naturally to the north-northwest. So the plume originated, we're going to highlight right here. This is essentially that corner of the building, that source area that I pointed out on one of the earlier slides. And so the groundwater is flowing up to the north, and you can see there are some wells that I'm circling. They're kind of a pinkish fuchsia color. Those are our recovery wells on the property. There's 4 of them. So we're pulling up that water, we're treating it, and then we're discharging as clean water to these 4 pink wells. These are just south of the Northern State Parkway. And then if we move up a little bit further north, we get to RW100. That's this orange well that I'm circling right here. That is the recovery well for operable Unit 2 or OU2 or offsite treatment system. Again, same process as OU1. We pull up the water, we treat it, and then we re-inject clean water back into the aquifer through these 3 orange diffusion wells right here. So before I move on, I want to highlight, again, I've said we've had over 100 monitoring wells in this plume. This plume is 100 to 400 feet below the ground and is about 900 acres. I didn't mention that at the beginning and I had intended to. So next, I know we talked about the 2 groundwater treatment systems that Lockheed Martin operates. So the question becomes, what happens for any of the contamination that does happen to get by our treatment systems? We have a plan in place. We have been working with the Water Authority of Great Neck North and the Manhasset Lakeville Water District because we knew that our groundwater plume were going to impact their wells. And so with that, we signed an agreement in 2013 for reimbursement. So we'll start off to the east, up to the north. And so we've got what we call the Community Drive well field. These are the Water Authority of Great Neck North's wells. And you can see that these are high producing wells or high production wells. And so it's kind of pulling the plume over and treating it. And then the Water Authority of Great Neck North is able to provide clean drinking water to the public. Moving again to the kind of the north central area of the plume, we've got what we call the Cumberland well or N5099. This is a Manhasset Lakeville Water District well. And again, as part of our agreement, we reimburse in accordance with that 2013 agreement that was signed. So this water is also treated prior to distribution as a drinking water source. And then the last water purveyor wells to be impacted are the ones off to the west. So we can see right here, this is the Watermill Lane well field. Again, also part of the said agreement. These 2 wells actually had treatment already on them before we impacted due to a contamination from another source that was a dry cleaner. So something that we do to keep monitoring the edge of the plume, that's what we really want to know, is we install something called Sentinel Wells, or think of it like lookout wells. Let's kind of see where it's going, what's happening. And so we install these Sentinel Wells. Our last 2 clusters of Sentinel well pairs were installed in, I want to say 2017 and 2019, and we have another pair of Sentinel Wells scheduled to be installed this year. So, I mean, I hope this gives you a better idea of what we're looking at. I will point out that there is no risk to human health with this plume. There's no exposure rate. There's no exposure pathway. Again, the groundwater is 100 to 400 feet below ground surface. We also know from our many years of collecting data that anytime there's a rainfall event, the rainfall, will start to percolate into the ground, and it kind of creates like a clean layer of water in between our groundwater plume and the surface. So again, there's no exposure risk related to this groundwater plume. So I just want to end by just saying, hey, thank you so much for inviting Lockheed Martin here tonight to allow us the opportunity to brief everyone on the work that we've been doing. And I hope that you see that, we are working hard to, take responsibility for this environmental contamination that was caused so many years ago and really try to do the right thing and keep being open and transparent with the community and the leaders by our routine briefings. So again, I hope this, I hope you've learned a bit and have a better understanding. I look forward to your questions. And so thank you, everybody.
Thank you for the presentation, and we appreciate that you're going to stick around and engage in Q&A. That's great. It was a very thorough presentation. Very great, gave a great overview of everything. So thank you so much.
Thank
you. Yeah, let's keep going, and because I know we want to get to that Q&A and such. So
Neil, excuse me, Neil, one issue. We have some legislators in the audience.
Yes, acknowledge that. Sure. Yes.
Okay. And we have Senator Anna Kaplan,
Yes.
and legislator, Nassau County Legislator Ellen Birnbaum, and Town of North Hempstead Town Councilwoman Veronica Lurvy.
So thank you each of our three elected officials. There may be some others if you want to shout out if we missed you, but we
And yeah, and also yeah, Assemblywoman Stiletto. She's also she was invited, and I believe she may be on also.
thank you all for participating. So so we want to go to the Department of Environmental Conservation and get their perspective. And so Garish Desai, sorry, your name, but welcome. And let me throw the floor to you. Make sure you unmute yourself. And so has Lockheed Martin been a good partner in working with the DEC in terms of providing the information you need and doing all the things they are required to do under the agreements? And what's the state of the cleanup? Make sure you unmute yourself, Garish. Garish, you got to unmute yourself. We did hear earlier when we checked in, right? Okay.
I can. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So,
There he is.
Girish Desai from New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. I'm a project manager for the Unisys Corporation site, 1111 Marcus Avenue, Lake Success. And today we are, thank you for inviting DEC to provide the oversight role that we play and to cleaning up the hazardous waste site and I mean, start doing the presentation. So, okay. So as I said, I'm the project manager. We also have DEC staff participating today. Chris Engelhardt, Regional Hazardous Waste Engineer for Region 1, Division of Environmental Remediation, and also Rick Mustico, Director of Remedial Bureau A, Division of Environmental Remediation. He's stationed in Albany. So DEC has, as Glenda mentioned again, DEC is overseeing the cleanup at the Unisys site since 1993, and to continue cleanup and also provide a clean access to the drinking water and no exposure through the contaminated soil contact inhalation. So what we make them to do is we continue to monitor the groundwater quality, which is on-site and off-site. We also make them to do periodic groundwater modeling updates. Also, we monitor the soil vapor on the property at OU1, which is operable unit 1 that encompasses the site itself. And then also we have tested indoor air in operable unit 2. So I'm going to give a remediation progress update today, and we're going to start from 1993 to present. The OU1 groundwater treatment system was installed and operating since then, and soil vapor extraction system, as Glenda mentioned, also operating in the source area, and also we have installed a sub-slab depressurization system that also at the site and the main building and two other buildings that protects the occupants of the building. Also, groundwater extraction and treatment system is also installed offsite, as Glenda mentioned on the map, and is running or operating since 2006. And both OU1 and OU2 system has cleaned up almost 103,000 pounds of volatile organic compounds. And we treated almost 11 billion gallons of groundwater. So this is a big, significant achievement for this site. So what we do to protect the public water supplies, we require Lockheed Martin, because they are the responsible party, to provide a compliance report to the affected water district to make sure the ongoing compliance with the public water supply mitigation program. Also, if there is an issue, they should be installing, operating, maintaining the well treatment system and working with the water suppliers. We have a network of Sentinel Well to monitor the plume before it reaches the public supply well in terms of groundwater quality. We monitor the groundwater quality every quarter and annually to make sure the groundwater, the monitoring and how much it is there and how far it will go, and also how much it will impact the public supply well and what kind of concentration will be in public supply well in the future. So we have done that, and that includes, as I said, plume monitoring, and then based on the actual data, we input into the groundwater model to update the model. So we going forward with actual data every year, and we update the groundwater model periodically, but when we need it, we can order them to do it immediately on certain tasks, or we can make them, usually they do periodically every 2 years. So as Glenda mentioned, the site investigation remedial history, she already mentioned about the 4 contaminants of concern, that basically these are the 4 major ones that were emanating from the site: TCE, PCE, and CIS-12 DC and Freon 113. So what DEC has done, working with this responsible party, the Unisys was the first responsible party, and we signed a consent order back in 1991 for them to conduct a remedial investigation and a feasibility study and interim remedial measures. So we didn't waste any more time. After doing some site investigation, we found out there was source area and there was a groundwater contaminated at high levels. We directed Unisys Corporation under the consent order to install a groundwater extraction and treatment system immediately. And in 1994, we directed them to install a soil vapor extraction system in the source area to start cleaning up the contamination before even go further to investigate the site. So we took the immediate action to protect the public health and environment. Then in 1996, as Lockheed bought the property, and the DEC now designated the on-site contaminants and the off-site contaminants as 2 separate operable entities, just to understand and fully clean up the site. In 1997, we completed the remedial investigation, and what we do is we work closely with the state health department. They review all the documents submitted by Lockheed and Unisys at that time, and they look at the health perspective for the site to protect the public and community and public health. So in 1997, DEC proposed a cleanup plan for OU1 and held the public hearing. And then after receiving comments and concerns, we responded to all the concerns and issued a record of decisions. The record of decisions is a document that Lockheed is responsible to implement. So it says what kind of remedy they need to do. So for groundwater, we told them, or there are orders them to do groundwater pump and test system, which was ongoing on site. And then with the on-site recharge at that time. Soils continue to run SVE system, which is called soil vapor extraction system, and remove soil and sludges from the dry wells, which was the source area. And then put some sort of land use restriction around and institutional control in the form of deed restriction on the recharge basin property. So in 2001, Lockheed Martin sold the property, but retained the environmental liability, and the site was redeveloped by new owners for commercial. As you know, there is LF Fitness and there is a hospital, Long Island Jewish Hospital and North Shore Hospital, now called Northwell, is operating their facility there. So after Lockheed sold the property, they kept the environmental responsibility. They keep working with the state, with DC and the DOH. And I just, one thing to mention is when we issue a ROD, we also want them to sign in a consent order to implement the record of decision. So in 1997, they also signed a consent order to implement the OU1 record of decision. So then we evaluated the design of what the ROD stated, and then we come up with the more effective plan after doing evaluation that we can run the 730 gallon per minute extraction system on site, but we will discharge the water off site and they will have a more expanded capture zone. So that was installed in 2002. The new oil-burn groundwater treatment system began operations, and we were used to use the carbon treatment system, but then we switched it to air stripper, which is required at that time based on the concentration that we're getting. And then, as Glenda mentioned again before, in 2006, we have that groundwater extraction well installed on the Great Neck school property, and water was treated at the Manhasset Lakeville Water District facility. So what we do for offsite groundwater? So now we bring it back to the OU2. So offsite groundwater, we continuously monitor and the model updated. The groundwater flow is north-northwest, and plume has impacted a public supply well and irrigation wells, because you know in your area there are a lot of golf courses. You have Deepdale Golf Course, Press Meadow Country Club, you have Village of Lake Success Golf Course, and North Shore Tower, there is a golf course. So this golf course has all irrigation wells that also pumps the water. And so DEC require this monitoring to all these wells. We also sample the irrigation well. And based on the contamination offsite, we order or directed Lockheed to install a treatment system at community dry wells, because we were monitoring it and also modeling it. And the model predicted that the well will be impacted. So we took preemptive decisions and told Lockheed to go and work with Water District and install a well treatment system to provide to public a drinking water that meets all the standards. As I said, the New York State DOH fully engaged in this review and decision-making process with DEC. Groundwater Public Supply Water Protection and Mitigation Program was instituted, and they oversee that work and to make sure that every community member gets the clean drinking water. DOH also has evaluated potential public health exposure to contaminated groundwater by irrigation well, and no impacts were identified, so then no action were required. DOH also has evaluated potential for offsite vapor intrusion, and based on the data collected, no actions were required. So we keep continuing doing investigation, installing monitoring wells offsite, tracking the plume, and based on all the work that we did, over hundreds of wells, we issued a OU2 record of decision in December 2014. So what this includes, RAD stated Lockheed that they need to continue operating the existing offsite groundwater treatment system to prevent the contaminated groundwater moving further to the public supply well. Also, the RAD includes additional extraction well to increase the groundwater pumping system from 730 to 850 gallon a minute to enhance the plume capture. So this is all activity that they need to do. And based on that, they also signed a consent order to implement the record of decision for OU2. That OU2 includes a public water supply protection and mitigation program that specifically requires Lockheed for installation, operation, and maintain for any system, water treatment system that is installed by them for the public water supply protection. Then if there is any issues, there is a response plan for different scenarios that they need to provide a response if there is a need, if the concentration approaches a certain level, and they may require them to go work with the water district to enhance the treatment system or do whatever other actions requires. And then DEC also requires them, because the site, we already issued the record of decision. So what happened in normal course of operations for the project moves into the site management now, because we already ordered the record of decision that say what remedy they need to install. and then the remedies were already installed and running. We have a valid treatment system on a public supply well that were impacted to protect the public health. So now the site is moving into a site management phase, and the Lockheed is developing a plan, and DEC will review and approve it with the DOH, a dynamic flexible site management plan that will be worked out in near future. So when we issued the record of decision for OU2 in December 2014, we also issued a RAR amendment because we did certain activities to amend the RAR that we issued in 1997. So this OU1 RAR amendment was issued in January 2015. What it does, the Lockheed was asked to do the pumping rate modification to enhance the capture of the plume on site, and there is implemented. Then they were supposed to install a subslab depressurization system installed to prevent the soil vapor intrusion into existing building on the property. And also requires them in the future, if the site redevelopment occurs and the area not acquired by the building will be used for building construction, they still need to do the soil vapor intrusion study. And also the EC RAD require them to install or impose a institution control that we call environmental easement that prevents site property from changing the use from commercial use to any other use. Also prohibits Lockheed or the current owners not to pump the water on the site which is contaminated. Also, they have to prepare, as I said earlier, to prepare a site management plan and need DEC approval. And based on their site management plan, the Lockheed will require to annually certify that all the system they have installed on-site and off-site, we call engineering control system, subslab vapor system, mitigation system, they have to certify every year that these engineering controls and the environmental easement on the property is still in place and working properly. So how we make sure the groundwater plume monitoring and modeling is going well? Yes, we do quarterly monitoring. We also sample the raw water from the public supply well. And we have annual monitoring that have an expanded list of on-site and off-site wells. And then when we get the results, Lockheed after review by DEC sends out to the water districts, quarter regions, so they can see what the concentrations are in all the Sentinel well. And also periodically we update the groundwater model to predict where the plume going for the tracking purpose. And what it does, the plume predicts the plume will go in this direction or it is there. So, and then also predicts how far the plume will be or how long it takes the plume to impact any new public supply wells. And based on that, we actually go and install more wells in the path of the plume to check the migration and the groundwater quality. So it's not just predicting through the model, we actually verify what is happening in the field. So here is the two plume plots from 2015 that was created. And as I said, we updated in 2019, and it shows the plume configuration with different layers showing different concentration. But this is like in all aquifer that covers the upper glacial and Magothy aquifer, but this is a combined picture so people can understand where the plume is. So what happened if you compare this figure, you will see in 2015, if you look at your left side, there are two public supply wells called Watermill Lane public supply wells owned by Water Authority of Great Neck North. In 2015, they were not impacted. In 2019, these plume source, the wells were impacted, and this model prediction shows actual concentration. So if you look at on the left corner, there are Sentinel well called 53 ml, 53 mi. It shows concentration, how much it is. And also, if you go to public supply well, we know how much concentration public supply well has. So this makes a connection between the plume is going in that direction. We know actual concentration before the public supply well, and based on this concentration model predicts how much it should go up in the future and what needs to be done for the protection of the airstrip or the treatment plant that built in for the treatment of the other source that they were impacted by the water mill land. So they will also have an operation and maintenance plan, and then they will work to notify the water district quarterly with the results. And we're doing extensive work on this thing. So now basically what I provided the information about what DEC and DOS does together, but this slide summarize, as I said earlier, New York State DEC works very closely with the New York State DOH and Nassau County Health Department also to ensure the water supplies and protect the public health. New York State DEC in consultation with New York State DOH also, come up with the site remedies for protective public health and environment. So now if any members of your groups are interested or public is interested, they can contact state health department, the contact person for this site. We call them a project manager. Her name is Renata Ackerby. Our contact information is here. And due to pandemic, I appreciate people, if they want to try to contact them through the email, which is in the bottom. And then also another director of Bureau of Water Supply also available to answer any questions that anybody has. So if you can have any question, please feel free to contact the health department, contact people. Now also locally, if you need somebody about your drinking water quality, you want to talk what quality of water you get, and the contact person that I identified is the Robin Putnam, who is the director of Bureau of Environmental Protection. The phone number and email address is provided here. So if any community members or groups or whoever wants to contact them, they will be happy to answer any question that you have. So, we have done significant progress on this project. We are making sure the drinking water provided to the community is protected, and there are no exposure to the groundwater contamination or soil vapor or soil. So by ending my presentation here, I'm very proud that I've done an excellent job on this project, and we removed 3,000 pounds of contaminants out of the ground. It's not an easy job. We pump every day and remove and treated 11 billion gallons of water. So this is a significant progress on the project.
Wow. Okay, so that's a lot of information to process. And as I said, we do have a specialist, Sarah Malin's going to speak in a moment. It's going to help us with processing all of this. But let's now hear from Gregory Graziano, from the superintendent of the Water Authority of Great Neck North. And Gregory, we throw it over to you. Make sure there you go. Okay, unmute yourself. And did you want to do any PowerPoint, or you just wanted to speak? Oh, there you go. Okay. There you are. What's up?
Somebody brought this up for me, so thank you.
Yeah.
So the first slide is basically, this is the service area of the Water Authority of Great Neck North that shows where our wells are located. All the way to the south, if you can see my mouse, the community drive wells 12, 13, and 14 are technically off the peninsula. Those are the 3 wells currently impacted by the plume that we're discussing tonight. And then when you head northwest, becomes the Watermill Lane facility, where the wells, currently the wells 2A and 9 are impacted. 11A has not been impacted at this time. And then heading to directly north from Community Drive, there's an additional well, well 10A, that's being monitored to ensure that that well does not become impacted. As of today, well 10A on Ravine Road has not been impacted by this contamination. Go to the next slide. Whoever's running it for me.
I think it's Beth.
Oh, is that me running? Okay.
There you go.
Okay. So here's just another map basically showing the initial plume, the former Unisys site, our community drive wells here, and then to the northwest, our Watermill Lane wells. Off this map, directly to the north, up this direction is where there is concern potentially for, like I said earlier, the well 10A Ravine Road well to potentially be impacted. Next slide, please. Okay, as the two previous speakers mentioned, the four chemicals or contaminants of concern are tetrachloroethylene, cis-1,2-dichloroethene, 1,1,2-trichlorotrifluoroethene or Freon-113, and trichloroethylene. All four of these contaminants have an MCL or maximum contaminant level for drinking water of 5 parts per billion. And there is some additional contaminants in this plume, but these are the 4 major components of it. Next slide, please. The slide was should have been updated, so my apologies, but the well 12, which was drilled and developed in between 1998 and came online in 1999 in that range, had GAC, granulated activated carbon, utilized as a form of treatment. The GAC was put in place in 2005. In 2014, due to the rising levels of VOCs in the wells, it was determined it would be much more efficient to switch to a PTA or packed tower aeration treatment system, which some people call an air stripper, to take the contamination of the water and ensure that we're giving the public a non-detect level of quality of water of any contamination. So the first detection of the Lockheed markers were February of 2005. Between that period, between 2003 and 2020, you can see on the table below, pre-treatment, we've seen 3.3 tetrachloroethylene, non-detect post-treatment, 20.9 of cis, 2.7 post-treatment. That was when we had GAC. Since the air strippers have been on board and being utilized, there has been non-detect for that contaminant. Freon-113, 2.0 parts per billion, and trichloroethylene 5.9. Again, the 0.54 was when we were utilizing carbon, and carbon has the ability to unfortunately bleed off as it's being spent and getting to the end of its useful life. With air stripping, that does not occur. Next slide, please. Same as well 12. This well was developed and drilled between 98 and 99, and similar levels, 12 and 13 are both in the Magathy aquifer, but screened a little bit differently. So that's why you'll see a little bit different levels on the pre-treatment. And post-treatment, 3.6 parts per billion was again due to carbon, but this well, as well 12, was switched over to packed tower aeration treatment in 2014. Next slide, please. Well 14 is our newest well up at the site. This well was drilled and developed between 2013 and 2014. As we were building the air stripper facility for wells 12 and 13, that treatment facility for the packed tower aeration treatment was built with enough to handle all 3 wells. So we can pump all 3 wells at one single time through 2 air strippers, 2 clear wells, 4 booster pumps, and at all times maintaining a non-detect. And as you see, well 14 shows non-detect all the way down the post-treatment side, as that never went through carbon and always went through air stripper. Next slide, please. And that was it. That's the end of my presentation. Oh no, sorry, there's more. Well 2A, okay. Well, as was alluded to earlier, the wells 2A and 9 at Watermill Lane have had treatment on it for many years prior to the impact of the Lockheed Martin plume. Our first detection of the Lockheed Martin plume markers we have is July of 2009. As you can see, there's on varying levels, 13.6 of the tetrachloroethylene, 7.3 in trichloroethylene, 8.7. But post-treatment, because this uses packed tower aeration, there has been non-detect picked up for all these years post-treatment and what in the product going out to the public.
And Mr. Graziano, do you want to just say again what non-detect means? That, well, do you just want to clarify what that means?
So when the water is analyzed prior to treatment and then after treatment, which would be post-treatment in a laboratory, whatever the laboratory equipment can measure down to the nth degree. So post-treatment non-detect means it's not being detected at any level through the lab equipment.
Okay.
Well 9 is, again, it's basically a sister well to 2A. Both these wells are in the upper Magathy and have very similar water quality due to their close proximity to each other. And therefore you'll see very similar pre-treatment numbers between the two wells, between 2A and 9. This well, we first detected the Lockheed plume markers in August of 2014 based on its geographic location. Again, well 2A was approximately in 2009 and well 9 in 2014, just for travel time, et cetera. Okay.
Mr. Graziano, I'm with the committee and I'm president of the Great Neck Breast Cancer Coalition. What I would like to know is, was vinyl chloride ever a contaminant in the plume? Because I do recall last year hearing that at a meeting. Is that, you mentioned before that these are the VOCs, but and that there were other contaminants, but these are the major ones. Is vinyl chloride like one of the contaminants that needed to be cleaned up as well?
Well, off the top of my head, I don't recall vinyl chloride, but Glenda can answer that a little better. Freon 22 is one of the other contaminants. There's different dichloroethanes and ethenes in the plume, but I don't remember off the top of my head, or even Garish can answer if there was vinyl chloride in the plume at any point.
I think these are the major contaminants, and we sample, and Glenda can add to that. All the wells that we sample, and we send the data to all the both water districts. And I don't think we detected vinyl chloride recently or in the past offsite in close to where the plume is now. But we have to look back the data and we can answer that. But
Okay.
top of my head, I don't think if they're getting it, they should be having this detection while they sample their drinking water. But you don't see it, so it's not there.
So Glenda Clark, your name got mentioned a couple of times. Did you want to add anything to that, shout out that question?
Sure. So vinyl chloride is a daughter product. So if there's any natural degradation of these chemicals in the water, it can turn to vinyl chloride. We do sample for vinyl chloride, but we're not seeing significant amounts of vinyl chloride. We do remove some vinyl chloride from the groundwater on site, but not off site. We're not seeing it off site. So you know how when I was showing you our two treatment systems, so on site, we're seeing it in our treatment system, not so much off site. So it's essentially staying on site right now is what we're seeing.
Well, when you mean on site, you're saying it's not migrating into the plume? Like, what does that mean actually?
Yeah, so kind of, that's a way to look at it. So what we're seeing on site is the source, right? That's what we're seeing.
Right.
And so there we are seeing some degradation. The chemicals themselves can naturally degrade into lower, and so yeah, so we're seeing that on site just because of the the groundwater conditions in the soil on site is allowing for some of that natural degradation. So we are pulling some of that into our OU1 groundwater treatment system. But what we have on the treatment system is something called potassium permanganate, or PPZ. And so the treated air goes through that PPZ, and that's going to remove the vinyl chloride.
So you're saying it's naturally occurring as far as the vinyl chloride, because of that chemical that you just mentioned, it's disappearing on its own? Is that what you're saying?
I wouldn't say vinyl chloride is naturally occurring. It's occurring because of the trichlor. I think, yeah, it's just degrading to that as a natural process.
From my understanding, though, chemicals that degrade can be even more toxic than the parent chemical itself, the parent compound. So last year when we had that meeting together, I took notes.
Okay.
And vinyl chloride, I'm just like a major note taker.
Oh, I get it. Me too. Go for it.
So, okay, so we've got a lot in common. Okay, so vinyl chloride, whether it's, a parent compound or a degraded compound, it's still it's a carcinogen. It's got, that's, if you look it up, anybody, looks it up, it's a carcinogen. So even if you have a little bit of vinyl chloride, depending on your population of whether it reaches, we'll get to that later on with the questions, because a lot of people want to know about drinking water, etc. But I mean, even just a little bit of vinyl chloride is not okay, depending on who may possibly be exposed to it.
Right, I understand. So yes, we're seeing it on site, we're treating for it. We're not seeing it so much off site, but we do have treatment already on our system that is off site. We have PPZ units on our off-site treatment system. And I will say that we are remember that monitoring well network of over 100 wells, we are sampling for vinyl chloride.
And when you're sampling, are you picking up in like what percentage of the wells are you picking up the vinyl chloride?
That is a question I do not know the answer off the top of my head, to be honest.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But no, the great thing is I also take a lot of notes and I can write that question down.
Okay, amazing.
So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Laura, this is Greg Graziano again, sorry. Since
Okay.
we've been tracking the contaminants since basically the end of 2002, regarding Lockheed and some other contamination, we haven't picked up vinyl chloride in any of the water authority wells that have been impacted by Lockheed to date. 2A, 9, 12, 13, or 14 have not had one single detection of vinyl chloride. I just looked up my some spreadsheets and found vinyl chloride not listed.
Thanks, Greg. That was a fast answer.
Okay.
Well, thank you for talking, so I had time to look it up.
One of the benefits of Zoom, where you can take advantage of that. So this was a great question, Laura. Maybe we can move this right into Sarah's presentation.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, great question. Very important question. So next is Sarah Malin, JD, a water specialist with a background in groundwater protection, water resources management, and environmental law. She is an associate professor in the Department of Environmental Technology and Sustainability, NYIT College of Engineering and Computing Sciences. She will respond to questions and also take a look at each of the presentations that you just heard and give her analysis of everything we just heard. And Sarah, I'm sure you had a chance to glance at some of the questions. If it's at all possible to anticipate some of those questions in your comments, that would also be great. So I throw it over to you. You've really been a leader for as an advocate to protect Long Island water for so many years. What is your take on how well this is being managed? This is a 30-year plus problem, obviously very complex. But what's your assessment of things?
Well, thank you for that very kind introduction. But I think what we've seen presented this evening is a very good example of a responsible party that is working to collaborate with the community as well as the regulatory agencies, and is doing a good job of carrying out their commitment and their responsibility to clean the site up. So I didn't see anything that was particularly alarming. The technology that they're using is standard remediation technology that is kind of the workhorse for cleaning up sites like this. I did have some questions though that didn't get covered in the presentations that I think might be on some people's minds. So maybe I could just jump to some of those questions to generate a little discussion. I think probably the number one thing that people might have some interest in is, well, let me back up. This state DEC has asked all Superfund operations to evaluate the contaminated groundwater for PFOA, PFOS, and 1,4-dioxane. And those chemicals haven't been commented on yet tonight. And so first I want to know if this plume has been evaluated, what the outcome was, and then I have a follow-up question based on what you have to say. Does the DEC
Is that directed to Lockheed Martin, that question?
Okay, Lockheed Martin, that's yours.
I can take it. Sure. So yes, we have looked at both PFOA, PFOS in the plume as well as 1,4-dioxane. We did sampling the DEC. This was what, 2017, when DEC was requiring all responsible parties to go out and sample. We did. At the time, there was no MCL for PFOA and PFOS in New York State. So we were following the US EPA health advisory level, which was 70 part per trillion. We were well under that. Of course, I think we all know in 2020, the MCL was released as 10 part per trillion for both PFOA and PFOS. We did have, of the wells we sampled, we had 3 wells that came back with levels just over the 10 part per trillion. One was 11, 13, and okay, there's no quoting. I know this is recorded, but no quoting me. I think about 21 part per trillion of the 3 wells that came back with detections above PFOA, PFOS. We've also done a site, you know, granted, we just purchased this site in 1996. They had years of operations before that. We've gone through our historical records and we don't have any records of historical use of PFOA or PFOS. So right now we don't have like the fingerprint that says, oh, this is yours. We've talked a little bit with the DEC, and if they require us to do more sampling, we'll do more sampling. But that's just kind of where we are with PFOA, PFOS. As far as 1,4-dioxane, we've done a bit more sampling for 1,4-dioxane. Of course, 1,4-dioxane has the MCL of 1 part per billion. We have seen levels just a bit over the 1 part per billion. Generally, we're below it for sure. But of course, you know, it's ubiquitous across Long Island in the groundwater. And again, we don't have historical documentation that says it was used at the site. And so right now, we don't have the line of evidence that says anything that we've found comes from the former UNICEF facility, but we are sampling for it at least on an annual basis in our groundwater monitoring wells.
Let me make a comment on what Glenda said. So DEC ordered them to sample for emerging compounds, and in 2017 they did a sample for PFOS and PFS and the 1,4-dioxane. Then we ordered them to continue sampling for 1,4-dioxane because the PFO levels are, you know, whatever the numbers were, DOH did not require us to sample it, but the 1,4-dioxane, and everybody knows this 1,4-dioxane also is associated with chlorinated solvents. So they had a detection about 5 ppb on their source area well. And based on that, we made them to continue sampling for 1,4-dioxane. So we have a lot more data on 1,4-dioxane. But as Glenda said, the offsite Sentinel well only has less than half, 0.48 ppb of 1,4-dioxane in one well. So, but we still continue monitor the emerging contaminants as we do on other sites, and any action required based on that, DC will work with the DOH and we're working with it. And if DOH and DEC orders any action, we will order it if we require. But we need additional more sampling because PFAS were sampled once, and now we have MCL. We will have another round of sampling coming up soon. And we evaluate the data with the DOH, and whatever action is required to protect the public supply wells from any impact of all these emerging compound, we will do it whenever we need to do it. In like sampling, we'll say we need to do this, we will go to the next step. Like as I said, in public supply water mitigation plan or protection plan, we have all the stages. You investigate and then predict how much concentration will go to the public supply well, and then come up with a response action. So we will do whatever is needed to make sure the public supply water is protected from this emerging compound.
Okay, so let's take
So
a
let me just
And
comment on your
treatment.
As you kind of referred to, 1,4-dioxane can actually leach out of water contaminated with TCE, among other things. So it doesn't have to be a raw product being used by a facility to still end up in the groundwater plume. And so that's why it's really important for these major Superfund sites to do a thorough analysis on whether 1,4-dioxane is present or not. And then the question becomes, if it is present in the plume, then will the DEC require treatment for the impacted area, because you're discharging it back to ground after the water goes through treatment. And the treatment we have now does not remove 1,4-dioxane. So does DEC have a position on that yet?
Garish.
Yes, but I think there was some interruption and I cannot hear the whole question.
Oh, okay. So it's speaking to the question of 1,4-dioxane,
Yeah.
and whether or not, do you have a position as the DEC that after they've stripped the water clean of the contaminants, they still may have the 1,4-dioxane? So what's your rule about that? Are they allowed to put the one,
Is Rick want to answer this question? Rick?
Oh, okay. Yeah, Rick, unmute yourself.
I think it looks like with the door closed, I can't hear it.
How's that?
There you go.
Okay, thank you. So Lockheed is required to discharge the groundwater, the treated groundwater, through permit process or an equivalent permit process that we work with our Division of Water at DEC. So they will have to meet, and they have to meet all those discharge requirements. Glenda, I'm not sure if 1,4-dioxane is on the discharge requirement that Lockheed has. Do you recall?
I want to say no,
Okay.
but I want to say no.
Okay. So, as Sarah mentioned, PFOS, PFOA, 1,4-dioxane is a concern to the department. We're working with Lockheed Martin to make sure that the plume, to sample the plume specifically for 1,4, if it becomes an issue, if there is groundwater contamination there, then we'll continue that monitoring, enhance that monitoring, and look at the discharge requirements for that treated water.
So you didn't show a map of where the monitoring wells are located. You did show a map that looked at an earlier distribution of contamination and then the distribution of contamination now. And so we aren't able to know whether the sites that you're looking at would include the parts of the plume with the very highest levels of contamination in them. and they would be natural sites to really look very closely at. By comparison, if you look at what has happened at the Beth Plume, which is much larger, but it has similar types of contaminants. They sampled over 600 well sites or locations. And of that 600 samples, over 300 had detections for 1,4-dioxane. So it is a very common contaminant in these sites that have high levels of some of these TCA contaminants. Given that, we don't want people to be drinking TCA, 1,4-dioxane at all, I think that is something that needs to be looked at a little bit more closely. I believe that the Water Authority of Great Neck North has found 1,4-dioxane in some of their wells. I hope Greg could maybe clarify that. And the question of whether the well that did show a detection, if it has any relationship to the plume. Greg, are you there?
Yeah, I don't see his Zoom image. So we also.
Well, maybe that's a question for further investigation.
Okay. Did we have the other water department person? Could we direct it to them and Hasset Lakeville Water Department? Or?
I am not familiar with whether 1,4-dioxane has been detected in any of the Manhasset Lakeville wells. If they have a representative, maybe they could comment on that.
So, yeah, Beth, do we have the ability to unmute Paul Schrader if he's here? He was indicated that he may participate. Be able to handle a question or two like that.
I don't see him in the attendees to unmute him.
Okay, I know it's tricky. There's a lot of names and stuff.
So I would just comment on one other thing that I noticed as the presentations were going along, and then turn it over to everyone else who has a question. And it had to do with the Sentinel Wells. Installing Sentinel Wells is a very good idea. The question, however, is how deep are the wells, the Sentinel Wells? Are they single well points or are they a cluster of wells? So how deep are they? And then what is the trigger for using the data from the Sentinel well as a warning or an alert that something is coming their way? So maybe Glenda or the DEC could answer that.
So is that part of your response plan, Glenda, that if you have an indication in the Sentinel wells, that you have to act on it at a certain, you have a plan for that?
Yes. Right now, we are working with the DEC on what Girish was mentioning in his presentation, Public Water Supply Protection and Mitigation Program Plan. I think I got that acronym right, the PWSPMP. And that document, we've got different action levels. So when the Sentinel Wells, as the plume starts to approach a water purveyor well, we can start looking at, okay, if it hits, X part per billion, we need to approach the water authority and say, let's look at your design. Let's make sure what we're going to have, what contamination concentrations that hit your well, your treatment system is going to be able to handle that. And Greg also mentioned, Greg Graziano in his presentation mentioned what was well 10A. It was a bit further north on the peninsula. He mentioned that has not been impacted yet by our plume. And then in my presentation, I had mentioned we've got a Sentinel well pair to install this year. That's a Sentinel well pair that we're going to be installing in protection of well 10A to make sure that we can better track the plume before it hits that well. As far as how we install our Sentinel wells, we do pairs. We do Sentinel well pairs. So we do 2 wells, pretty much right in the same vicinity of each other at different depths. And what we do when we drill those wells is then we'll figure out, basically we work with our model, we have a groundwater modeler, and then we take the technical data from the well as we're pulling up soil cores. We take that data and we work with Garish, with the DEC, to determine where the well screens should go. And we also know from working with the Water Authority and Manhasset Lakeville where their wells are screened. And so that helps us determine where we're going to put our screens. And so it's a big collaborative effort between everybody to make sure that where we're putting our wells and where the screens are make the most technical sense so we can protect the drinking water wells. And Sarah, I think I got all the answers because you had a few questions in there, but if I missed anything, please let me know.
Well, I was wondering if you had a cluster of wells that were screened at different depths, so you could do discrete sampling in different parts of the aquifer.
So depends what wells we're looking at, but generally we just have a well with a certain screen at a certain depth, and then we'll put one right next to it, but it'll be lower or higher, you know? So we are trying to look at different areas of the aquifer. But yeah, but generally for the Sentinel wells we've been installing recently, we do two wells in different at different depths.
Has there been any attention given to whether the plume presents a risk to the Lloyd aquifer? In other words, is the plume down at the bottom of the Magathy so that contamination could migrate into the Lloyd if it were exposed?
It's a good question. Right now, we don't have any evidence of our plume being in the Lloyd aquifer. We do have some of the deeper wells. We do have some wells in the Lloyd aquifer of those 100 monitoring wells. Some of them are in the Lloyd, and we do sample those on a regular basis. They're not the quarterly wells. I think they're annual wells that we sample. But right now, we don't have evidence that we are in the Lloyd aquifer. Just the Magathy.
Neil, I'm going to turn it back over to you if
Thank you so much. Yes, I do. So Glenda, let's keep you right in the game if I can. There's
okay.
So many questions. Let me tell everybody that's online, the Q&A section is open. You can click there and add a question in. And Greg Graziano, we lost you for a moment. You had someone send us a note, but you're back, so we see you back here now. So welcome back. So Glenn, maybe we can do one or two quick questions first, like what do you do with the contaminants after they're taken out of the water?
Sure. And yep, this is a fun one because I get to kind of nerd out a little bit.
Okay, good.
So when we pull up the groundwater, we take it to a treatment system, and what we're using is what Greg was also describing for their drinking water treatment. We use it for our pump and treat systems. We call them air strippers. So there's these two big towers. So if you remember in the photograph that I had of the two treatment systems, the one on the right, it had two silver tall towers. And so those are air stripper towers. So we pump the water up to the top, and then the water falls down by gravity in the tower, and it's hitting these spheres, these balls that have holes in them. And so when that happens, the water's dripping, and every time it drips, like the contaminants are vaporized, they turn into vapor, so it enters the air, and then it goes down to the bottom of the tower, and then we pump it back up to the next tower, and it drops down again, and then that water, that's how we remove the volatile compounds. So then that water is essentially, it goes through a bag filter just to remove any particles, then we discharge it to the aquifer. But we've got all this air that needs to be treated. So for that, we run it through carbon. We run it through carbon beds. And then PPZ, just in case there's vinyl chloride, to go back to the other question. And so what happens with the carbon is it starts to collect all the contaminants. And so what we do is we're monitoring, we take samples of the airstream before it enters the carbon and after it enters the carbon. So we know what the efficiency of that carbon is. And then we know if we need to change up, because the carbon only has a certain life. So our carbon typically lasts about 12 to 13 months before we take it out. But what's really cool and very green and sustainable is that we work with our carbon vendor, and they take it offsite and they're able to regenerate it. Now that's science I don't fully understand, but it's cool. So they regenerate it, and then we're allowed to reuse that carbon back in our treatment system. And then
And the contaminants they pull out of the carbon when they reuse.
They pull it out of the carbon.
Where those contaminants go.
That is a question for Evoqua, our carbon vendor. But yeah, and so
If handled properly, they're not going to.
Yeah, it gets handled properly. So yeah, we take and then we always take samples of the end stack to make sure that we're discharging air that has been treated.
Okay, so again, maybe something that's sort of a quick factual type of thing. So can you just characterize the plume a little bit more? So it was mentioned that you're as deep as 400 feet at some parts, but there was also reference to like a 1 to 400 feet.
Sure.
So can you comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So where were those dry wells we had, right? The source of the contamination. When we're closer on site, closer to we are to the site, the closer we are to 100 feet. As the plume starts to migrate northwards, that's when it also starts to sink a bit. So that's when we start to see the range going down to about that 400-foot level, far out on the periphery of the plume, if that makes sense. So it's just kind of going lower as it migrates out.
So yeah, one of the questions was how many depths do you sample at for sample location? So are you capturing that, which I think was sort of part of one of Sarah's questions also?
Yeah, again, so it's not just our Sentinel wells where we do like the cluster of 2 wells. That's pretty standard. In some cases, we even have 3 wells within an area at different depths, so we can make sure that we're tracking the different depths all throughout the plume.
Okay, great. So let's see, okay. So a number of people asked about the stuff being removed.
Sure.
So let's bounce back to some other, I mean, I guess a number of people have asked the question of, is it 100% clean? And I think we kind of we're coming close to that with some of our questions. We, there was a comments about some of the data from the water district shows most of the contaminants after the treatment are at non-detect. So that might not use the word 100% clean because maybe there's still something there, but it's at such a low level, it's not showing up on the equipment if we understand non-detect, right? But a couple of people have asked, is it 100% clean? And I think there was an acknowledgement that there's still this question about the 1,4-dioxane. So how would you respond to that question of after you've treated it, is it 100% clean?
I feel like for a clean kind of question, I should defer to the DEC because they are the regulatory agency that oversees that.
For drinking water, the Nassau County Health Department requires what kind of parameters they use or the methods for the drinking water testing to the water district, not DEC. And Mr. Greg Graziano and Paul Seder, who is also the superintendent for both water district, they are required to submit their drinking water data to the Nassau County Health Department, and they oversee and give them guidelines if there is an issue with the drinking water.
Okay.
Excuse me, Paul Schrader, who is superintendent of Manhasset Lake for Water District, he said that he wanted to attend and answer questions, but for whatever reason, he hasn't showed up. Just want to weigh in on that.
Okay. So actually, there's a question that's sort of related to that, to his area. Do you see the question in the Q&A? They're not numbered, but one is from Betty, and I apologize if I get this wrong, but Leon, Betty Leon. So she's asking, is there a need to place testing sites southwest of the plume? North of New Hyde Park is part of the Manhasset Lakeville Water District. That's why I sort of drew my attention to that question, Laura. And it's just south of Union Turnpike. At one point, I heard when you were moved into the neighborhood, 2004, that the plume was traveling southeast of the site along Marcus Avenue. So is the drinking water safe in the New Hyde Park area? And so who wants to take a stab at that? You have to recognize I don't actually know the area quite as well as all those descriptions that we just went through with the maps, but it is kind of relevant to the map question. Garish, how do you feel about that question about the safety of the drinking water in New Hyde Park area?
Well, the groundwater plume, you know, I'm going back to historically that the Unisys site, what happened back when they were running the systems for cooling the building back in, you know, until they closed, or they switch over to the air cooling system, but they were using water cooling system. That means they pump the water from the Marcus Avenue, run through their facility and dispose of in the south of the building. And due to that operations that are going on, as Sarah knows, the groundwater, you know, pulled in the back, it pushed the groundwater behind, you know, below it. And what happened when we started the 1993, when we started the groundwater pump and treat system with 1,100 gallon per minute, all the plume was moved south against the groundwater flow direction. It moved back to the north to the the extraction valve that we installed to pull the groundwater out. And all the groundwater that contamination was pushed back by operations of the cooling system has been picked up mostly. And all the groundwater now south of the Union Turnpike is almost clean. So any area in that has no impact from the plume. Now.
Okay. So could I ask the most basic question that needs to come up in almost every discussion of drinking water, which is the drinking water safe to drink? We do have, you know, a couple of perspectives on that, and I feel like we should just sort of put it straight out there. Garish, do you want to go first in terms of the DEC? Is the drinking water safe?
Well,
and how do you and define safe or clean in any kind of complicated ways, or it's straightforward?
DC did all these efforts to make sure the plume, you know, as I said, we and Glenda's presentation, and we know that we clean up over 70% of this contamination faster, you know, because as we made the efforts to put a system back in 1993, we did not wait for years to investigate and do the cleanup. We started cleanup first. And that way we contain the plume on site and remove, you know, when you start to do early work, when you find something, take care of it, it has a lot of benefits. And that's what we did. We removed from the source area, so far we have removed 47,000 pounds from the OU1 system. We removed 12,000 from offsite groundwater system. We removed almost 45,000 from SV source area. That all combined comes out 103,000 pounds. All these things that we did has reduced the amount of contaminants in the environment. Otherwise, what would happen, it was not captured early on, could have moved offsite and may impact the public supply. Well, so that this action that DEC did reduced the amount of contaminants on moving offsite. And
I definitely,
it protects the public supply.
If I could say it in a positive way, I get from your presentation, you feel very passionate about how intensely this project has played out over all these years.
Yes,
and I think what you're trying to say to the public is, even though it took 30 years to get to this point, that's not for a lack of effort, that it's actually been a pretty concerted effort from day one. And when it was
I mean, this was a key thing to contain the plume on site. When it's not contained, it moves offsite far away, and it takes time. So once it goes far other way, it becomes bigger and hard to contain. So what we did is we tried to remove the source area that contributes to the groundwater contamination. We attacked right away. We started putting the pumping system in the front of the building so the groundwater doesn't go offsite, you know. And these absence. So what happens is these are the action that taken on a project has a very positive results now. We see this, and then also we're putting valid treatment system.
Well, I will say, I don't live in the area. I live in Massapequa, so I haven't followed every aspect of this story, but I'm very active in Nassau County issues. So I have a general understanding of a number of these plume-related problems we have in different parts of the county. And when you describe that timeline, it sounds a lot more proactive than what I've seen in other plume problems. So I get the point you're making about the role the DEC has played on all this. And we also understand the point that was made in terms of Lockheed Martin's role. They were not the original polluters, but they are the responsible party. And that term in this context, Sarah Malin pointed out that she thought this was an example of a responsible party acting responsibly. And that's a good thing I think, in a very real way. So you want to say anything, Glenda? You get the question, is the water safe to drink?
Well, I think water district should answer the question because they are the one who provides the water, not the EC.
Yeah, I would also defer to Greg and Paul.
Okay, here it goes, Greg. It's in your
Okay.
ballpark. How do you answer the question?
Yeah, the water authority, I can't speak for Manhasset Lakeville, obviously, but for the water authority of Great Neck, all of our water that we supply to the public exceeds all federal and state and local standards. So the water is safe, absolutely safe to drink.
Okay, I have a question. Why, with all this progress that you're talking about, why do we have to wait till 2044 in order for this to be remediated? And in 2044, will that be 100%?
Great question. Do we hit 100% after
Remediated
like
as
50
going,
years at that point?
they're starting for 100% remediation. So this is a little bit of clustering, some questions, but I think that it's really something that's on everyone's mind.
Yeah. So Glenda, how does the remediation plan play out from a long-term perspective? If you're at 70% now, will you hit 100% by that out number?
So I think everybody knows that remediation takes a very long time. And I'm trying to think the best way to answer this so that it makes sense for everybody. So sorry, I'm thinking a little bit on the best way to word this. And if Girish, if you want to jump in, if you've got better wording in your head, please go for it. But remediation of groundwater is very challenging because we're constrained by many things like the flow of groundwater where we can put treatment in. So we will be continuing to remediate for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that strictly answers your question, but we are in this for the long haul to continue remediation.
Okay. I mean,
Girish, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, what I will add to this thing is, as we have done a good progress on the project or excellent project, whatever we want to say, look at it, the continuation of monitoring and also managing the plume and having all the tools available to control the plume. We need to put any additional valve, whatever is required. DEC will continue to work on this project as we did in the past, and that just shows that we are very, proactive of taking actions, and we'll continue to do the same thing for this plume.
Sarah Malin, can I throw a question in your direction for the homeowners listening to this? And some of the presentation's been very reassuring in some respects, but they still may have concerns. What recommendations do you give to people in terms of what they can do with their own homes? Should they use water filters at the house? What's your comment on that?
Well, the homeowner should know what problem they're trying to solve. Because all water treatment doesn't work on everything. And you really have to pick a treatment technology that matches the contaminant you're concerned about. So typically the VOCs can be addressed by the homeowner in carbon filters or reverse osmosis systems. And you would pick the system that best matches the contaminant you have a concern about. The 1,4-dioxane is a special case because the technology to remove it is not at a scale that is available to the homeowner. And so that's why for this particular contaminant, it's really important for the public to be aware of what the impact has been on their own water supplier, and letting the public know what are the conditions in their own water supply system, so they can then make their own informed choice. if 1,4-dioxane is not an issue for a given water supply system, great. If it is, and the water supplier says we're putting in technology and we're going to remove all of it within, a defined amount of time, a year from now or whatever, then the homeowner has the option to, continue to drink that water for the time it will take to be able to remove it, or they can make other choices in the interim. So for the 1,4-dioxane issue, because a homeowner really does not have a lot of choices, they can either drink the water that is provided and understand that it may not be 100% within the drinking water standard at this point in time, but it will be at some point in the future, and choose to drink bottled water during that time or just drink the public water supply. And so it's not an ideal solution for them, but at least they are in the loop and understanding what we all know about their given water supply, water quality.
Okay. Okay.
Oh,
So-
that's quite sobering.
Yes, it is. It's, yeah. Well, we're doing our best to, I guess there's a lot of information we're all taking in tonight, and we appreciate each of the participants coming forth to, really work with the community and just sort of lay out the facts. There were one or two times maybe you don't know the answer, no shame, and say, I'm not sure about that. I think the people are making a sincere effort to give good factual information here tonight, and a lot to process, a lot of technical stuff too.
Neil, was there questions I missed before when I had a malfunction going on there?
Yeah, there was actually a question. It had to do with the 1,4-dioxane, but I think
I remember what it is.
Okay.
It was a question of, I believe 1,4 has been detected in the Great Neck Water Authority. And my question was, do you know if the detection that you have found had any link to the Lockheed Martin plume?
It's a great question, Sarah. So I reached out quite a few months ago to Garish on 1,4-dioxane and perfluorinated compounds, both based off that 2017 sampling that was performed by Lockheed Martin. I had a lot of questions about that sampling, a lot of concern about that sampling, as one of the contaminants, the perfluorinated, say were done only pretty much predominantly north of the site, and 1,4 was, say, done at the south. I may have them mixed up, but there was not a trail that you could see across all of their monitoring wells to connect the dots. So I've asked Garish, and Garish has been in touch with the New York State Department of Health to look at this and add these contaminants to Lockheed's quarterly sampling that they do for the VOCs. And Garish got back to me today. New York State's looking at this pretty intently, I believe. We do have some concerns at the authority because what we see at the community drive wells tend to mirror what they're seeing at the site, but obviously on a lower scale because it's further away. So you get degradation as it moves, the groundwater is moving. So for instance, Glenda said earlier that the perfluorinateds were at higher levels at the site, and we're seeing higher levels of the perfluorinated at Community Drive, whereas the 1,4-dioxane was at lower levels, and we're seeing lower levels at just basically above detectable at Community Drive right now. We've had some as high as looking over at a spreadsheet 0.17 again, or in 0.18 looks like our high right now, which is significantly lower than what the MCL is. That's for 1,4-dioxane. For the perfluorinateds, we've seen as high as 7 on the perfluorinated. So it's something to monitor. The last sampling we did in October showed pretty much non-detect across the board other than PFOA, which was at 3.5. So it's a fluctuating situation going on. We're doing an enormous amount of sampling ourselves to try to get a handle on what the impact potentially to those wells are and what we're going to have to do as far as treatment is concerned. But we have other wells on the peninsula that have been impacted, are either in design for treatment or are actually offline and under construction right now for treatment for these contaminants. So that we'll take the same approach with Community Drive. If necessary, we will put whatever treatment will work and what is needed to get it down where where everyone's happy and providing the public with the best quality water.
So just looking over the remaining questions that we might have missed and looking at the clock also and realizing we're zooming in towards our end here. There were a couple of questions about whether boiling water has any effect in terms of these contaminants. I think we all agree that that doesn't do anything to address the contaminant problem. Sarah addressed the question of what kind of method you could use to filter water at the house. Just looking over quickly, I think most of what, we might not have got it exactly the way it was worded, but I think the essence of most of the questions were addressed. Does anybody see a question that we missed that you want to treat as a last question or something?
I have.
Go ahead, Laura. Sure.
Okay, my
And
question
Laura, by the
is-
way, is with the committee concerned about the plume that has helped to organize tonight, and thank you for all of that.
Oh, well, thank you. We'll get our thank yous in a second.
Mhm.
What is the exact pathway of the plume and its trajectory? Is it onto the schools and our homes? It's a two-part question.
So Glenda, you did in your presentation characterize some of the movement of the plume. Do you want to speak more directly as to its direction?
Sure. So the groundwater in this area of Long Island flows naturally north-northwest, we'll say. But there are things like I showed you the Water Authority of Great Neck North Community Drive wells. Those are their production wells that are kind of pooling the plume. So not necessarily at that point going north-northwest. It's starting to pull a little bit towards the east, but again, getting captured by those wells. So in general, we're going to say north-northwest, which is just natural, the way the groundwater flows. And then the next part 2 of that question, Laura, I believe was, is it under our homes and schools? Yes. Yes, the answer is yes. However, there's a big but it follows that yes. The plume, again, is so far underground. It's 100 to 400 feet below that there is no risk of exposure to this groundwater. Girish, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Well, I do want to add something to that. So for the VOCs, because they're heavy and they sink to the bottom, okay, I understand that concept. But I also know, as you probably do too, that the VOCs also can degrade and there could be degradation going on, and other compounds, the other compounds that are created from that degradation, can those rise up? Have they also been tested? Have you looked, has Lockheed Martin tested and searched for those degrading chemicals that are being released by the parent compound? And would they rise up? Because they may have a different constitution to it.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to follow your question. I'm going to have to repeat your question back to you to make sure I understand.
Okay, well, just like vinyl chloride, it degrades into other things. All right. So TCE and PCE also can degrade. They undergo significant metabolism. I got this information from a professor and researcher, Lawrence Lash, from Detroit, Michigan, and went over this with him. And he said there are breakdown products from TCE and PCE, and so has Lockheed Martin searched for those breakdown products? And is there the possibility that they don't have the same properties as the compound, as the parent compound? And can they reach our groundwater, our drinking water?
And I know
Or, you know,
Chris
just more of
Engel
a-
unmuted himself from the DEC. Chris, did you want to jump in on this question? Are you guys testing for the
Yeah,
whole
I was
range?
just going to speak. I was just going to speak to the the concept of how these contaminants get deeper in the water,
Right.
and the mechanism that's really primarily responsible for that is not so much the weight of the compound. These compounds are dissolved in water. It's more the fact that as contaminant moves away from the source, well, when contaminants sitting in groundwater, periodically rain comes down on it. And so you have clean water coming on top of the contaminated water. The further contaminant is from the source, the longer it's been flowing in groundwater from the source. So the more rainwater that has come down on top of it. So that's it's sort of pushing it down. And what I would say, to the, people are concerned about potential exposures from this contaminant. My understanding, and Grish, you could chime in, is that so what happens is as this stuff gets pushed down, as it migrates away from the site, you have a layer of clean water on top. In order to have any kind of exposure to inhalation, the water at the groundwater soil gas interface would need to be contaminated. The contaminant has to go through that water to get into soil gas. If it's not in that water, it won't be getting into soil gas.
So basically what I add to this thing is that, DEC requires Lockheed to test full TCL. It means full all the list of volatile organic compounds that EPA requires them to test. So it is not just that we test 4 compounds, we test all the compounds of volatile organic on a list of the volatile organic compound list that they use. So if there was any other compound detected or degraded, we'll see it like a vinyl chloride that we see on site. We see some, around the site, but we never seen farther away, like a mile away or whatever, close to the supply wells. And also, as Greg mentioned, that he did not see any vinyl chloride in his testing of the public supply well. So, if there is any testing to put extra compound, that degradation, yes, if it is there, it will show up in the testing we do every quarter. But I don't think we have found any other compounds degradation, because if you look at the fingerprint of this plume, these 4 compounds are present in almost every well, including our pumping well that we pull the contamination out. So these are the 4 major compounds: so DCE, PCE, and Freon 113 is present in the plume, and the way it is. So if you look at the ratios, the 1 to DC is the highest amount. Then you have a TC, then you have a PC, and then you have Freon 113. And it's universally common throughout all the sampling value. You see this thing. So what I see is if there was any other degradation to a different compound that you're referring to from one of the professor telling you, it should be detected by the lab, but we never seen it.
So you've never seen metabolites coming from either TC, PC, or 1,2-DC. That's what you're saying?
If it is
You've never seen that. You've looked for it and you've never seen it.
No, we look for, we follow the target compound list that is, we sample for every site on Long Island, New York State, and most probably EPA does in the whole nation. And we go by that list. And that list have several compound is for the test. The lab does it. And if they detect anything other than the 4 compounds, they will report to the Lockheed report to us. But Lockheed didn't have any data that shows we have other compounds other than the 4 that we're managing right now.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Laura, I just want to follow up. I mean, that, your question about breakdown and vapor, that's something that DOH and DEC are concerned about too, at every volatile site that we deal with. Girish, I think you had provided us with some data earlier today. I think as far as vinyl chloride, the highest that we've seen off-site was about 0.5 part per billion, so about half of the drinking water standard. That answers, I think, part of your question. The other part of your question is, soil vapor, and Chris, I think, did answered that a long way in saying that we know we have clean groundwater on top of the contaminated groundwater, so we're not, we wouldn't expect that volatilization to occur into soil vapor and thus into folks' homes. That being said, we looked anyways. We looked around had Lockheed, directed Lockheed to look around the site, around the operable Unit 1 site, and sample indoor air and soil vapor, subslab vapor, and we didn't find anything of significance. So DOH said, basically, the environmental sampling indicates that indoor air of the offsite structures is not impacted by on-site contamination. Part of what helps us too is that Lockheed is on-site. They've implemented the record of decision to, part of that record of decision requires them to run a soil vapor extraction system. So that's a pretty powerful system that sucks air out of the ground and treats it. And I think that was discussed a bit earlier, and that air is treated. And to help folks on site, we need to make sure, and Girish mentioned this earlier in his program, that we have a subslab depressurization system for the building itself, and I can't remember how many millions of dollars you said, Girish, that cost. But any future on-site construction would also require a subslab depressurization system to protect those workers in the building. So, you bring up a good point. When we do sample for volatiles in subslab and indoor air, we sample for the full suite, as Girish mentioned, for the volatiles, and we are very, very well aware that yes, these things can break down into vinyl chloride, being the end product, and so we do sample for them, and when we did, it was good, it was clean. So.
Okay. So great question, Laura. Thank you. Did you want to let? Okay. Good. So
Thank you very much. And I think we need to wrap it up. We could really go on for hours.
Yeah, we could just keep going.
Yeah, we really could. We could just do an all-nighter here. So thank you so much for your input. These questions are going to beget more questions, I'm sure. And thank you so much, Neil, for being a wonderful moderator. And thank you to the DEC and Glenda Clark and the Water Department, Greg Graziano. And also, I hope there'll be follow-up with Manhasset Lake, the Water District. And thank you for all the participants that came, and to the great committee that my great committee members that we've really worked pretty diligently to get this off the ground.
Yeah.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura.
Yep.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate
for
the
the-
opportunity.
Sarah.
Yes, Water Authority as well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for all your input there.
Oh, and to Sarah Malin, wherever you are, did she leave?
Sarah, she can't do that.
Sarah, did you leave?
She's here.
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay, I don't see her picture. Okay, thank you, Sarah, for your input, and especially the question about the aquifer. I think that's something that has to be looked at. Okay, thank you, Neil.
Oh, yeah, no, my pleasure. Thank each of you that handled all the questions. Really great discussion. Tons of
Yeah,
information.
well, I've been sleeping with these questions.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Glad you recorded it. It was a lot of information. Garish and Glenda Clark in particular, you two really gave us a lot of information. But everybody, thank you all. Pleasure to participate.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Girish.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Good night.